Please welcome the president of Long Island University, Dr. Kimberly R. Klein.
Good afternoon. The Polk Awards are one of my favorite events of the year, and I'm so happy to be here to recognize this year's extraordinary journalists. This year's George Polk Award winners represent the pinnacle of investigative journalism, addressing critical issues across our nation and around the world. Our Polk winners have demonstrated courage, persistence, and a commitment to exposing the truth regardless of the risk involved. Throughout the history of the Polk Awards, we have bestowed more than 900 honors in recognition of excellence of investigative journalism. I want to give a special thanks to the Polk Award Luncheon Gold sponsors who have helped make today's award recognition program possible: Goldman Sachs, Michael Emmerman and Patricia Sackhausen, and the New York Times. And a warm thanks as well to our silver sponsors listed in your luncheon program. So let's get started. It's now my pleasure to introduce my good friend, John Darton, Director of the Polk Awards.
Thank you, Dr. Kim Klein, and thank you, LIU, our home for all these years. Welcome, winners and well-wishers to the 77th Annual George Polk Awards. What an insane year for news it's been. And it's especially gratifying then this year to salute reporters and editors, you agents of accountability. You've really been in the trenches this time around, facing hostile fire both at home and abroad. First, some pleasant business. I find it pleasant. As many of you know, we've been on a campaign to have our awards endowed in perpetuity. I want to thank our funders and ask them to stand, although please hold your applause until the end. First, Jim and David Ottaway, our longtime steadfast supporters. Neither are able to be here today, but they have sponsored and endowed the Foreign Reporting Award. Michael Emmerman and Patricia Stockhausen, National Reporting Award. The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Local Reporting. The Hanno Family Trust, Sports Reporting. Susan K. Reed, Justice Reporting. Lawrence K. Altman, MD, Health and Medicine Reporting. David and Susan Rockefeller Endowed Fund, Environmental Reporting. And finally, the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation for both national and international TV reporting. That's a total of 9. With the 9, we're within reach of our goal, which is 10. One more to go. And when we get there, we'll be able to double the bonus money for Polk winners forever. And there's still a number of orphans out there looking for adoption, including major awards for reporting in business, education, politics, and photography. This year, something new, a new venture. We're giving George Polk Awards to high school students. The winners received their certificate yesterday evening at the seminar on the Brooklyn campus. The topic, which David Toffel moderated, was the human face of immigration. And I have to say, those high school students, when it came for the Q&A, they just shot these brilliant questions at the 3 panelists, who handled most of them pretty well. Anyway, the students are with us today. I'd like to ask them to stand as I call out their names. Again, please hold your applause to the end. Feature writing, Ellie Goganova and Esther Gould. High School for Math, Science, and Engineering for The Eternal Life of Jeff Buckley, published in The Echo. Investigative reporting, here we have a tie. Angeline Collado, Curtis High School for Lost SNAP Benefits Impact Curtis Community, published in the Curtis Log. And also a winner, Lathanya Williams from the Bronx River High School for ICE Crackdown Threatens Students' Neighborhoods in the Bronx River News. And for Best New School Newspaper, Guadalupe Abraca Vasquez, Editor-in-Chief, and David Rolfling, Faculty Advisor of the PACER NYC from Pace High School. Let's give them a hand. Congratulations to you all. Someday, in the not-so-far future, we may see you up here again. Now, let's start. First is the Sidney H. Schanberg Prize, and I would like to ask Jane Schanberg, Sidney's widow and the sponsor of the prize, to read the citation. Jane.
Doing what we do best, and one of the world's most obscure African wars has been raging for 3 decades in the remote eastern region of Congo. A mix of tribal hatreds, corrupt governments, and foreign actors seeking to exploit the country's mineral wealth. This generational conflict has caused massacres, starvation, and chronic disease. An estimated 4 to 6 million people have been killed, and it continues. For his masterful New Yorker magazine investigation, Can Trump's Peace Initiative Stop the Congo's 30-Year War? The 2026 Sidney Schanberg Prize goes to John Lee Anderson.
Thank you all. As long as I can remember, the Congo's been synonymous with political corruption, armed conflict, and resource exploitation. To most people around the world, it's become white noise, largely unnoticed and relegated to the margins. Other places are seen as having more geostrategic importance and therefore our more focused attention. I often feel that if we could pay more attention to the Congo and some of the world's other problematic, mostly forgotten places, Haiti, Sudan, Somalia, Burma, to name just a few, the conflicts elsewhere could be also better tackled because increasingly they overlap and are shared by all of us. Congo's current war is over 30 years old, but its real origins lie much further back and have as much to do with outsiders treating it as a place of plunder as they do with its internal issues. This dynamic is unchanged today, with the current US government offering its power to provide peace in exchange for cobalt. In such ways, therefore, the Congo and its problems endure. Left unnoticed and untended, it may even come to be seen one day as having geostrategic importance, as so many other places have in recent times. Iran today, Iraq, and Afghanistan before it, with tragic consequences for all. I'm immensely grateful to be working for The New Yorker, which continues to allow its journalists to go deeper and stay longer, and to David Remnick specifically for giving me the green light again and again to follow my nose on the stories that I want to do. I thank my amazing editor, Nick Troutwine, for his panache and his patience. To the fact checkers, Melanie Mead, Natalie Mead and Dan Green for working on this story so ably, and to the photographer, Moises Saman, my longtime companion, for accompanying me to the Congo. Thank you so much for honoring me with the George Polk Award, and thank you for the Sidney Schanberg Prize. In the name of the late, great Sidney Schanberg, which goes far beyond anything I might ever have expected, thank you very much. Thank you.
And now we'll be joined by our citation reader, known to you all for her on-camera professionalism and her decades of top reporting for CBS, including 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl.
Thank you, John.
And our first award is for foreign reporting.
So am I supposed to just start?
Yes.
Okay. But first I want to say how much I'm enjoying being in the company of my fellow reporters, producers, editors. Is there any company that you enjoy more in this world than us? Let's be honest. It's true. All right, I'll get down to work. For young and impoverished women in East Africa, the offer was too good to pass up. Venture to Saudi Arabia as a domestic worker and send remittances back home. But then came the brutal reality. A report of an unusual number of deaths caught the attention of Abdi Latif Dahir, the New York Times correspondent in Nairobi, Kenya. With the aid of two colleagues, Vivian Nareem in Saudi Arabia and Julian Sheck in London, he produced a series of stories showing how a network of the rich and powerful, including members of the Saudi royal family and relatives of the presidents of Kenya and Uganda, personally profit off the abuse-ridden exploitation of migrant labor in the Gulf. The three reporters have won the George Polk Award in Foreign Reporting. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'm not sure what we're doing. Here we go.
Thank you all. When we started this project a little under 2 years ago, we didn't know that the story of the first woman we interviewed, that is Faith Murunga, a Kenyan woman whose Saudi employer beat, burned, and then denied her salary, was going to be part of a much larger hidden and systematic pattern of abuse of East African migrant workers in the Middle East. Nor did we know that her story and those of others we interviewed would take us deep inside the political and institutional establishment across East Africa and Saudi Arabia. That's why I want to begin today by thanking the hundreds of women and men who opened their homes and their hearts to us. They invited us in again and again, allowing us to observe their lives, gather intimate details, and bear witness to their experiences. Whether at a gas station in Saudi Arabia, in a village hut in Uganda, or in an apartment complex in Nairobi, Kenya. I also want to thank the local journalists, translators, lawyers, and activists who helped us find contacts and obtain records, sometimes at great personal risk. I also want to thank Kiana Hayari and Imanit Dabar, whose incredible photography and portraits brought these stories to life. Too often, stories of this kind of abuse, particularly from Africa, are ignored or never given global attention. This award helps change that. For that, I want to thank John Durton and the Polk Awards for recognizing this body of work. I'm deeply grateful to my colleagues for their collaboration on this project. Justin, is a tireless force with an extraordinary mind and truly one of the kindest and most curious journalists I've ever worked with. And Vivian, whose attention to detail and dogged reporting completely raised the bar and transformed this story. I also want to give special mention to Vivian's wonderful son, Mazen, who was with her on the ground reporting in Saudi Arabia for so many days that we now consider him, at the tender age of just a year and a half, an honorary recipient of this award. We are incredibly fortunate to work for a newsroom that commits the times and resources necessary for stories like this. For that, I want to thank our leadership, our publisher, A.J. Sulzberger, Joe Kahn, Carolyn Ryan, and Mark Lacey. I'd also like to thank our editors on the international desk, Phil Pan, Greg Winter, Adrian Carter, Yara Bayumi, Marjorie Ulster, Loretta Carlton, and Lauren Goodstein. And a special thanks to the inimitable Mara Puzo, who believed in this project from the start, edited every single story, and made our reporting and our writing pulse with life. Thank you all.
Next, we have international reporting.
With USAID lying in ruins, Secretary of State Marco Rubio insisted that no one died as a result of the cuts. He was wrong. ProPublica reporters Anna Marie Barry Jester and Brett Murphy documented the sufferings and the details from abruptly terminated human aid programs and witnessed a cholera epidemic raging unchecked in South Sudan, and mothers unable to feed their starving children in northern Kenya. They also revealed how precipitously and recklessly the cuts were made, naming the officials involved and portraying shocking scenes of their incompetence and unconcern, winning the award for international reporting.
On behalf of myself and Brett Murphy, we are deeply honored to receive this year's George Polk Award for International Reporting. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has repeatedly said that no one has died as a result of foreign aid cuts. But in refugee camps in Kenya and South Sudan, we found that was not true. We met parents who lost children to starvation and children who lost parents to cholera as a result of decisions made by the Trump administration. This is where Brett says I should tell you about the time I fell in the floodwaters in South Sudan, or how we had to bail out a sinking boat with a tin cup. I'd rather tell you about all the sanitizer we went through because Brett could not stop putting his backpack down in the cholera wards, which were extremely active. We couldn't have done this work without the trust and support of our editors, who encouraged us to pursue these stories relentlessly. Sarah Childress, Jesse Eisinger, Tracy Weber, and Steve Engelberg, thank you. Thank you to our families and the journalists we worked with in Vietnam, Kenya, and South Sudan. And most of all, thank you to our sources, both here in the US and abroad, who opened up their lives to us and allowed us to do this work.
Next is national reporting.
For its relentless and unflinching coverage of a White House that defied standards and norms in expanding executive power, issuing pardons, extracting profits from governmental action, punishing localities and institutions deemed politically and unfriendly, prosecuting perceived enemies, abandoning environmental and public health safeguards, curtailing scientific research, and misleading courts and the public about initiatives like deportation of supposed felons and gang members, or bombing of Venezuelan votes to curb drug trafficking, the National Reporting Award goes to the New York Times.
Hello, it's an honor to stand here just as a representative of a vast team. Dozens of reporters, editors, and visual journalists who collectively produced a remarkable body of work last year under intense pressures and at a time when independent, searching journalism has never been more important for American democracy and the rule of law. At the highest level, this is coverage of a president who has pushed the boundaries of executive power in ways without precedent in American history, surrounded by lawyers who were openly selected for their willingness to provide a veneer of legal blessing to anything this White House wants to do. And it is coverage that sought to make sense of a fire hose of events unlike anything any of us has ever experienced, even in Trump's first term. To cite just 3 examples, our investigative team traced how payments to the president's crypto firm helped the United Arab Emirates win access to advanced computer chips despite national security concerns. Our immigration reporters obtained documents showing how officials defied court orders to deport migrants to a notorious prison in El Salvador. And our national security team revealed a secret directive to use military force against drug cartels, getting out in front of what became the legally contested boat strikes and then a high-risk commando operation inside Venezuela. It was a collective effort across many beats, guided at every step in the Washington Bureau by Dick Stevenson and Matea Gold, whose editorial judgment and steadiness made all of it better. And it came as the administration waged an intense campaign against the independent press, as everyone in this room is aware, personal attacks on reporters by name, lawsuits against news organizations, intimidating leak investigations, and restrictions that emptied the Pentagon of real journalists at a time of expanding war. And so I'd like to also thank David McCraw, our newsroom lawyer, for leading our courtroom defense against parts of that assault. This is a lonely moment for legacy media. There are fewer newsrooms led by ownership willing to marshal the resources for this kind of work and with the moral courage to fight for independent journalism in the face of government pressures. And so I also want to thank the Sulzberger family for remaining steadfast. That matters because our democracy requires an informed electorate to function. Voters cannot hold their government accountable if they do not know what it is doing. And that is what this work is for, this work of everyone in this room. That is who it serves, and that is our calling. Thank you.
Next, we have local reporting.
When 6 masked men seized a 30-year-old Tufts University doctoral student from Turkey on a suburban street, she first thought it was a kidnapping. So did a neighbor who called 911 and another monitoring a security camera. Eventually, as she was driving to Vermont in shackles and flown to a detention center in Louisiana, one of her assailants tried to explain, "We are not monsters," he told Ramisa Ozturk. "We do what the government tells us." For carefully fleshing out a case embodying just about every problematic aspect of a national campaign targeting immigrants, reporters Julia McDonald Nieto de Rio and Mark Arsenault of the Boston Globe, they have earned the award for local reporting. Come on up.
Sorry about the name. I'm sorry about your name.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to John Darton and the entire Polk Committee for this wonderful honor. It was the evening of March 25th, 2025, when I got an alarming text from a source. "Hey there, sorry it's late, but a student was just picked up by ICE," the text from immigration lawyer Masa Kambabi said. "She's a Tufts grad student." That student, we soon found out, was Rumesa Ozturk. Along with a team of Globe reporters, we worked ceaselessly to confirm who Rumesa was and what had happened to her. We learned that a year earlier, she had co-authored a mild pro-Palestinian op-ed in the university newspaper. She was an international student from Turkey, headed to a community iftar that evening when masked ICE agents wearing plain clothes accosted her on a quiet Somerville street, handcuffed her, and led her to an unmarked car. For almost 24 hours, lawyers, friends, and loved ones had no idea where she was. The following day, surveillance video of her arrest landed in my inbox. Several of us gathered around my computer in the Globe newsroom to watch. We heard her screams. There were gasps and a sense of absolute disbelief. I remember trembling while watching. We know now that she was crying out to her mother back in Turkey on the phone. As the video spread rapidly, Rumesa's arrest sent shockwaves throughout the nation, and Mark and I soon embarked on this project to tell a more expansive story. It became clear that what happened to Rumesa had grown into something much larger than any one episode or any one individual. Reviewing hundreds of pages of legal documents, court testimony, and conducting dozens of interviews in US and Turkey, we reported on the conditions of her detainment in Louisiana, the implications of this case for free speech rights, and uncovered how the federal government forged forward in targeting non-citizens who engaged in speech they did not agree with. And we also got to know Rumesa, a soft-spoken student who adores cats, a children's media scholar who has dedicated her life to kids, a friend, a sister, and a daughter who always checked in on her loved ones, even when she herself was going through dark times. She had not participated in campus protests and preferred to keep a low profile. So we heard this question from sources again and again. If this happened to her, they asked, couldn't this happen to any of us? We hope that along with all the amazing reporting from our colleagues in the industry, many of them in this room today, this series becomes a part of the historical record from this period in our country's history. Thank you to the Globe for putting the resources into this project, and a tremendous thank you to our incredible editors, Frances Storrs and Lisa Wangsness, who expertly guided us along the way, as well as the former editor of the Globe, Nancy Barnes, who quickly saw just how important this story was. And a little update on Rumesa. Today, the US government is still fighting her cases in immigration and federal courts. But despite all that she has endured, this spring, she earned her PhD from the Department of Child Study and Human Development at Tufts. She's also become an advocate for the women inside ICE facilities. So of course, an important thank you to Rumesa for bravely speaking out for this story, despite the tremendous risk she faced in doing so.
We have a small change in the program here. We're going to move justice reporting down lower in the program. So the next is environmental reporting.
I just want to say, you've heard of fear of flying. I have fear of mispronouncing people's names. I'm so sorry if I mangle anybody's. I'm really trying. No matter the long-term promise, artificial intelligence has an immediate downside. No kidding. The facilities require massive data centers, which require massive amounts of water and electricity. Tech companies planning them often hide their purpose from unsuspecting communities, but Business Insider found a way to penetrate the secrecy, searching for mandatory applications for air permits for backup diesel engines. The total number of data centers they discovered, a whopping 1,240. The magazine's staff has won the Environmental Reporting Award. Wow. Look at this. Thank you.
Accepting the award will be Hannah Beckler.
Hi. Big tech is racing to build a future predicated on the promise of artificial intelligence. These promises remain largely speculative. What our reporting shows is the impacts of this race are already here in our communities. As the West is experiencing record droughts this year, we found that 43% of the largest data centers are located in areas already experiencing serious water stress. Data centers that use up to several million gallons of water every day. In state after state, their voracious energy use is torpedoing our green energy commitments, even as they suck up massive tax subsidies in exchange for a tiny handful of jobs. This build-out is being driven by some familiar names: Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and QTS. Our reporting asks whether this trade-off for AI is worth it. Thank you to Business Insider and EIC Jamie Heller for supporting this in-depth work. I also want to thank our legal team for their vigorous support on all our records quests. I am representing a larger team of dedicated reporters and editors who filed hundreds of public records requests, pulled thousands of filings, and talked with many dozens, if not hundreds, of sources. I want to specifically thank Dakin Campbell, Rosemarie Ho, Nurimus Paracol, Robert Leslie, Dan Geiger, Ellen Thomas, and Adam Rogers, along with a team of fastidious fact-checkers. And I want to specifically thank an editor who really drove these stories forward and believed in the project from the beginning, Esther Kaplan. Thank you to LIU and Dirk Polk for recognizing this very labor-intensive work. Thank you so much.
The next is health reporting.
The online publication STAT focuses on news about science and health. So when the new administration began jackhammering government agencies responsible for healthcare and biomedical research, it turned out almost its entire staff to document the effects. It came up with 86 scoops and compiled a massive record of ways in which the Food and Drug Administration was abdicating its role as Americans' healthcare protector. It also produced a 10-part series, America Science Shattered, on the disruption of scientific research. Reporter Lizzie Lawrence and her colleagues have been awarded the Health Reporting Award.
Thank you to John Darton. Thank you to the judges. Thank you to the George Polk Awards and Long Island University. When I was assigned the FDA beat in late 2024, I thought it would take me a while to find the most interesting stories. I had a lot of acronyms to learn, and I thought it would be hard to get duty-bound bureaucrats to talk to a reporter new to the beat. Then Donald Trump followed through on his promise to let longtime vaccine skeptic Robert F. Kennedy Jr. go wild on health policy. Suddenly, I found myself covering an agency in turmoil. The FDA scientists wanted to share what they were seeing, and they decided to talk to me. Mostly, they were worried. Some told me that because of mass layoffs, the agency was struggling to inspect foreign drug manufacturing facilities and to conduct efficient drug reviews. Others confided their fears that politics were infiltrating the FDA's scientific processes in unprecedented ways, for example, with leaders fast-tracking drug submissions from companies that the president favored. They worried that this would make the drugs Americans use less safe and effective. And yet others talked about how Kennedy's vaccine skepticism was taking hold in the FDA as political officials placed restrictions on COVID shots over the opposition of agency scientists and wrested control of vaccine reporting systems. Every story became interesting and urgent. My sources made it clear that they thought the administration's actions threatened their work, ensuring the safety of our drugs, medical devices, food, and cosmetics. I am indebted to the federal workers who were brave enough to share their concerns and experiences despite their legitimate fears of reprisal. I am also indebted to my editor, Zach Tracer, for his thoughtful feedback and calm, no-nonsense demeanor. He has made this insane news cycle bearable. Thank you also to my wonderful colleagues and to Rick Burke, Stats Executive Editor. I am privileged to work in such a collaborative, ambitious newsroom where editors encourage reporters to chase essential health stories and not leave any stone unturned. Thank you all for this honor.
Thank you to the Polk Award Committee, the judges, and Long Island University for recognizing the work of our small but mighty newsroom, and I'm honored to speak very briefly on behalf of those who put in so many long nights and weekends making sure the American people stayed informed about one of the most consequential periods of upheaval for our nation's health and science infrastructure has ever faced. On the day of President Trump's inauguration, a memo was issued to the Department of Health and Human Services instructing all 90,000 of its employees to cease communications with the public. It would be a sign of things to come. And as the new administration set about making massive changes to the agencies that track deadly diseases, fund biomedical research, oversee safety for millions of patients, and influence the profits of billion-dollar health companies, it also began throttling information through a few political appointee-controlled channels. Under these conditions, it took countless acts of courage on the part of career officials, scientists, and staff to bring to light these changes and sound the alarm on their impact to the health of all Americans. These are densely bureaucratic institutions, and understanding the full picture of alterations to obscure policies takes work. Last year, STAT turned the focus of our entire newsroom to that effort. Reporters helped the public see that changes to things as innocuous sounding as multi-year funding models or indirect cost rate reimbursement were in fact moves that would jeopardize the future of an entire generation of American scientists. Our reporters uncovered the tactics of HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. that he's using to steamroll the medical establishment and upend decades of vaccine policy, while providing critical insights into the Make America Healthy Again movement that has brought him to power. RFK Jr. has vowed to bring radical transparency to the department. In reality, quite the opposite is happening. We are focused on continuing to document that this year and into the future. And so in addition to these and many other reporters, I also want to thank Gideon Gill, Laura Chang, Jason Uckman, and all the other editors who saw this moment for what it is and are pushing us to make sure that the American public does too. Thank you.
Next is political reporting.
A month before the 2024 election, ProPublica was on to the ruthless radicalism of Russell Vogt, the once obscure bureaucrat that President Trump would go on to appoint as director of the Office of Management and Budget. For The Shadow President, a revelatory year-long examination published in The New Yorker of Vogt's seminal role in the shredding of the federal workforce and the unraveling of decades of domestic and international policy, the award for political reporting goes to Andy Kroll.
Thanks, Leslie. Nice to meet you. First, thanks to John Darton and the Polk judges, the Polk Awards, and Long Island University. I am standing up here by myself, which feels a little out of place, but I want to be clear that this story wouldn't have happened, this work wouldn't have happened with some really, really incredible colleagues, and I want to shout them out, and then I will exit stage that way. But my wonderful colleagues at ProPublica, who have just created the most incredible, challenging, welcoming, challenging in a good way, obviously, powerful newsroom, and I feel lucky, privileged to be a part of it. Our partners at The New Yorker, who were just a dream to work with. There was a moment at the end where I remember the fact checker on the story found this tiny little thing, and I thought, thank God for fact checkers, and thank God for you, Linnea. I want to thank all the sources that spoke with me. There were a lot of panicked phone calls right before this story came out, threats of polygraph tests, threats of firings, threats of retaliation in other forms, and I appreciate them for sticking by me. Lastly, I want to thank my wonderful wife who is here, who helped me juggle, we juggled a 3-month-old baby. As we were closing this story, I promise I will try not to do that again in the future. Thanks.
Next is magazine reporting.
The deadliest immigration-related disaster in modern American history, the deaths of 53 migrants in the back of a tractor trailer in South Texas, prompted an extraordinary 2-year investigation across Central America by this reporter. He revealed the tragic stories of the victims, the inner workings of cartel-controlled smuggling operations, and the connection between U.S. border militarization and migrant deaths. For A Deadly Passage, Elliott Woods of Texas Monthly and the Food and Environmental Reporting Network has won the award for magazine reporting.
So it is a tremendous honor to be recognized with the George Polk Award and to be in this room with all of you who inspire me so much. I owe a profound debt of gratitude to a long list of people who supported me along this 2.5-year journey, starting with my editors, J.K. Nickel at Texas Monthly and Ted Ross at the Food and Environment Reporting Network, and to the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. Without partners like these, ambitious long-term projects like this one are almost impossible, especially for freelancers like me. I give my thanks also to Ana Alvarado, my fact checker, to Emily Kimbrough, my photo editor, to Ted Genoways, my mentor and fellow in the struggle, to Alejandro Subersa and Omar Perez, who drove with me across Mexico and Guatemala, and to my family and friends who held my hand and held me up through the darkest moments. The U.S. immigration enforcement system has been contributing to the deaths of tens of thousands of people for generations, and we have continued to invest in that system under Democrat and Republican administrations at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars and countless lives, and despite the fact that it obviously does not work and generates fortunes for organized crime. Building the immigration industrial complex has been one of the few areas of bipartisan agreement over my lifetime. And as my investigation found, the more we spend on it, the more migrants die. My deepest gratitude and respect goes to the families of the 53 victims of the San Antonio migrant disaster and to the survivors and their families who opened their doors and their hearts to me. Without their incredible generosity and courage, we would remain in the dark about what happened that day and about the horrific consequences. I dedicate this award to them and to the many thousands of people who've suffered or died trying to reach this country, whose names we will never know and whose stories we will never hear. Thank you.
Next is photojournalism.
A freelance photographer's searing portfolio of photographs captured the anguish in the hallways of 26 Federal Plaza in New York City as immigrants with scheduled court appearances were unexpectedly arrested for deportation. A world away, 3 Associated Press reporters portrayed disturbing scenes of Gazans struggling to secure food, challenging Israeli denials of famine. The Photojournalism Award is shared by Stephanie Keith on assignment for New York Magazine and 3 Gaza-based AP reporters, Abdel Karim Hanna, Jihad al-Shrafi, and the late Mariam Daga. The 33-year-old Daga was killed in an Israeli strike on a hospital 3 days after the publication of her award-winning work. Thank you. Come on up.
I'm Stephanie. So this story was definitely one of the hardest stories I've ever done, physically, mentally, and financially. physically just 4.5 months of waking up every morning and going off to the 26th Federal Plaza to stand around with menacing ICE agents, and mentally being there so many days on the absolute worst day of these people's lives, seeing in real time, right in front of you, the effects of Donald Trump's immigration policy, seeing fathers arrested and children screaming and mothers pleading for the father to come back. It was emotionally wrenching to see that on a daily basis. And financially too is, I'm a freelancer and I basically did this entire project on my own. I worked on weekends and evenings just so that I could be there for what I thought was this important story. And fortunately, I was contacted by Jody Kwan from New York Magazine, who saw what I saw in these pictures and chose to publish them. So I have incredible gratitude to Jody Kwan and David Haskell from New York Magazine. Thank you so much for giving a voice to these people and for my pictures. And I'm definitely honored so much for this Polk Award. Thank you.
So the Photojournalism Award has 2 winners. For the second winners, we will hear from them electronically. If you could please roll the video now.
قمت بتغطية الحرب على مدينة غزة وما زلت على رأس عمل لهذا اليوم.
احنا سعيدين جدا في ترشيحنا وفوزنا لجائزة جورج بلوك للسنة هاي، واحنا مبسوطين كثير او بهذا النوع من التقدير الكبير إلنا، انه جائزة كثير كبيرة ومهمة انه تختارنا كفائزين انا وزميل عبد بعد حرب دامت 2 في غزة ومعاناة في تفاصيل حياتنا اليومية واحنا بننقل الصورة، لأنه احنا عشنا المعاناة الحقيقية مع الناس، عشنا التجويع، عشنا الخوف، عشنا القصف.
يعني حصولي على هذه الجائزة، جائزة جورج بلوك، محطة هامة في مسيرتي المهنية، وشعرت يعني بالسعادة على منح هذه الجائزة، ويعني تقديري وهيدفعني للاستمرار بنقل الصورة من مدينة غزة.
وحاولنا بكل طاقتنا وقدرتنا انه ننقل الصورة الواقعية الحقيقية والإنسانية للي بيصير في غزة. سعيدين او حاسين بالفخر على فوز زميلتنا الراحلة مريم أبو دقة، اللي هي كانت عبارة عن جزء من عائلتنا الصحفية أكثر ما هي زميلة عمل، فترشيحها وتقديرها وفوزها في الجائزة كان إشي كتير كبير بالنسبة لنا وبعنين لها كتير شغلات، لأنه هي قدمت روحها للعمل الصحفي الإنساني في قطاع غزة.
فقدنا مريم بسبب هذه الحرب، ما كنا بنتخيل انه هنفقدها. الحرب هذه كانت شرسة، ما كانت تترك حد، كان اي حدا ممكن يموت معرض للخطر، وللاسف فقدنا مريم. يعني فخورين جدا بمنح هذه الجائزة لما زميلتنا مريم أبو.
Accepting the award on their behalf is Aaron Jackson.
Thank you all very much. I certainly couldn't say it any better than my colleagues in Gaza. So I really just want to thank Long Island University. I want to give special thanks also to Enrique Marti, who has been editing and coordinating with this group. I could not be more humbled and honored to be accepting this on their behalf. They are truly remarkable colleagues. Thank you.
Next is immigration reporting.
Pulled from a car in Maryland as he drove with his 5-year-old special needs son and sent to a notorious Salvadorian prison despite his protected status in what authorities would characterize as an irreversible administrative error. Kilmar Abrego Garcia might have been yet another anonymous victim of a deportation crusade gone awry but for the reporting of Nick Miroff of The Atlantic. For turning the arrogant and spiteful targeting of an innocent man into a global cause célèbre, Miroff has won the award for immigration reporting.
A little more than a year ago, I got invited to coffee with Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. I had been at the Washington Post for 18 years, and I hadn't been to a job interview in even longer. Meeting Jeff was a thrill. He was full of ideas and energy. When coffee was over, I called up a former colleague from the Post who had recently joined The Atlantic. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Do you think you got the job?" "I don't know," I said. "Jeff did all the talking." I started at The Atlantic not long after. A month into the new job, I got a tip about the wrongful deportation of a Salvadoran man with U.S. kids in the Maryland suburbs. Trump officials told the court that they had made an error but wouldn't do anything to fix it. It was the beginning of an extraordinary ordeal for Kilmar Abrego Garcia and a test of our legal system whose outcome is still uncertain. Abrego Garcia is back home with his family for now, thanks in part to the work of so many reporters who have followed this story and demonstrated the lengths to which the Trump administration is willing to go to make an example of his case and never admit a mistake. I'm grateful to the Polk Committee for this recognition, for the recognition of the work that we're doing at The Atlantic under Jeff, and the recognition of this story's importance at a time of so much shocking news. To Yoni Applebaum, who moved it with the speed of a wire editor, to my beloved editors Jenna Johnson and Griff Whitty, who I worked with at the Post and now at The Atlantic and are here today. Their brilliance is only matched by the care and unfailing support they show their reporters day in and day out. Thank you. Peter Latman from Emerson is here too. Thank you, Peter. It means everything to me that my family is here today, Melinda and my father, Bruce, who were my first editors, and especially my wife, Camila, and our children, Joaquin and Amalia. They put up with a husband and a dad whose attention is too often divided and whose work is never really finished. Thank you.
Next is national television reporting.
After the federal government summarily deported hundreds of Venezuelan men they called violent felons or known gang members to El Salvador's notorious CICOT security prison, CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez, he used an international document he obtained to learn the identity. Then, through painstaking research, Montoya Galvez, correspondent Cecilia Vega, and CBS's 60 Minutes producer Andy Court and Annabella Hanflake established that 75% of the deportees had no criminal record. 3 especially sympathetic victims, a gay makeup artist, a soccer player, and a food delivery worker, were profiled. The broadcast in April was among the first that put the lie to official assertions about those deportees. For its timely investigative report, the 60 Minutes team has won the award for national television reporting.
Thank you, Leslie. She's my office buddy. Speaking of The Office, Leslie knows this very well. There is a screening room at 60 Minutes. It's where we, the teams, present our pieces to the seniors before air. As you can imagine, this can be a very intimidating place. I think it has left more than one of us in tears sometimes. On this screening room wall, there's a sign that has a long list of words on it that literally, in giant words above that, says forbidden words. These are the words we are not allowed to use in our stories, including words like experts, prestigious, nation building, even the word even is on the list. And since my seniors are here, I would like to protest that because we should be allowed to use the word even. There's one word that's not on the list, and it probably should be, and that's the word craft. Sometimes when we come to events like these, we like to talk about big J journalism and the craft, and it makes it sound like what we do is very fancy and very glamorous. But to get a story like Prisoners on the air, it is anything but fancy and glamorous. It is a painstaking, painful, exhausting, and messy process. Leslie mentioned some of this. Camilo worked sources for years on the immigration beat in order to convince someone to give him an internal government document that had the names of these 200 Venezuelan men that the Trump administration sent to this notorious torture prison in El Salvador. From there, Mary, Annabelle, and Camilo created their own database where they took criminal records from the United States and around the world to cross-reference these names with these backgrounds in order to come to the damning fact that 75% of these Venezuelans had no known criminal records. And since we're among friends, Andy Court, my producer here, we can tell them that we wrote this piece in a bizarre mind meld of a perpetually open Google Doc that looked more like the whiteboard in Carrie from Homeland than an actual news script. And our love language is that we yell at each other debating words like over or more than. And not for nothing, during this reporting process, this editing process, led by Joe here, Annabelle slept on my office couch. All of this reporting happened in the shadow of the President of the United States suing our broadcast for billions, tens of billions of dollars, and his then friend, Elon Musk, at the time suggesting that 60 Minutes staffers be thrown in prison. I don't need to tell this room what I'm about to say. The elephant in this room is more like a bomb crater right now, that this is a hard time to be a journalist, and this is a hard time for 60 Minutes. But this team, including my friend Leslie, can stand here today and say proudly that we continue to report out the stories that require us to get dirty, to be messy in this reporting. And this Polk Award is an honor. We are very grateful for it. But frankly, it's a shot in the arm that our show needs right now. It's a reminder to us to keep charging ahead and to keep doing the stories that matter so much that you don't even mind sleeping on the office couch. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia Vega. The next award is Foreign Television Reporting.
In 2000, this is the title, In 2,000 Meters to Andriivka, filmmakers Mistav Chernov and Alex Babenko accompany a small unit of Ukrainian soldiers as they advance across a heavily contested stretch of forest to retake the village of Andriivka. By interspersing body cam footage with traditional filmmaking, they take the viewer directly into what is largely considered a suicide mission, while also capturing the intimate, human moments of a band of brothers on a moral quest for their country. For their powerful portrait of the lived reality of war, a collaboration between Frontline Features and the Associated Press. They have earned the award for foreign television reporting. Well done.
Accepting the award is Alex Babenko, who is part of this incredible two-man team that won a Polk Award 3 years ago at the onset of the invasion into Ukraine, holding up in Mariupol while they were on the kill list provided by the Russians. Alex Babenko.
Thank you. Just to be clear, I wasn't in Mariupol. It was Vasilisa, Evgen Maloryatka, and Mstislav Chernov, partner on this movie. Hello, everyone, and thank you for this incredible honor. Mstislav Chernov could not be here with me today, but I share this award with him and with the entire team behind 2,000 Meters to Andreevka. Our editor, Michelle Meisner, producer, Renia Aronson-Raff, and the Associated Press and Frontline teams. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, I was 15 years old. From the beginning, this war has been fought not only with weapons, but with propaganda, and for a time, many people believed it. Thanks to Ukrainian and international journalists, the truth about this war has remained visible. In 2,000 Meters to Andreevka, we wanted to show not only the truth, but the reality of the war, as it is lived by civilians who chose to defend their families and their land and went to the front line. I want to thank every volunteer who, since the first days of war, helped to defend my freedom, the freedom of my family and friends, and the freedom of my country. In a few days, I'm turning 28, and the war is still going on. But I'm deeply grateful to the people who gave me a chance to grow up, to finish university, and to have a chance to start working, telling the world what is happening daily in my homeland. At the same time, thousands of voices are being silenced in occupied territories of Ukraine and many other countries where wars are still going on. I hope that wherever humanity is headed, truth would still be our main value. Thank you.
And now we will hold the Justice Award.
Covering prisons is more than a beat for Jan Ransom of the New York Times. It is a passion. I am interested in writing about subjects that otherwise might be kept from public view, she explains, while elevating the voices of people whose stories might otherwise not have been told. So when she got a tip that a 22-year-old state inmate had been fatally beaten by guards, Ransom used contacts and insights to expose the details of that wrongful death. Then, abetted by data analysis from Times reporter Bianco Paola, she documented a half-century of dysfunctional and brutality in a series of immaculately researched articles leading to passage of a set of reforms. It has earned her the award for justice reporting.
It was late one Saturday last March, and the subject line of the email was urgent. Need to get in touch ASAP. The sender wanted to connect me to an incarcerated relative who he said had just witnessed prison guards, viciously beat a man, killing him. That next morning, I interviewed 9 inmates by phone, all of whom agreed to go on the record with their names, risking their lives to provide an account of what they said happened. They recalled the sounds of fists pounding against flesh and the sight of guards dragging a bloody, mangled man through the housing area. That evening, we broke a story about the beating death of Messiah Nantwi, the second inmate to have been killed by guards in New York State's prison in just 3 months. His death came as thousands of guards across the state had walked off their posts in an illegal strike that led to several prisoner deaths, including suicides and medical emergencies. and it forced the governor to activate the National Guard to supplement staffing. It was a prison system on edge, but also one that had long been known for its brutality. Drawing on court records, disciplinary data, and interviews with dozens of current and former inmates, my colleague Bianca Pallaro and I identified more than 120 instances in the past decade in which guards were credibly accused of having viciously beaten prisoners while they were handcuffed. They were victims not of justified uses of force, but put plainly, torture. It was a trend that we had saw increased. But for all the times that guards had brutalized inmates, and with what we knew of the 2 men who had been killed, it raised an obvious question. Had other inmates died following violent encounters with guards? And our final investigation in the series found that 3 other deaths had occurred in similar circumstances in the past 3 years. Our reporting became part of negotiations in Albany over prison reform. And before the end of the year, the governor has signed into law a package of bills meant to expand oversight of guards' behavior. I want to thank the Polk Committee for this incredible honor and for affirming that stories like these are important. Thank you to my editor, Michael LaForgia, for helping me to frame and shape this investigation. And thank you to editors Jim Yardley and Nikita Stewart for their support. I want to also give a special shout out to my sister who wanted to be here but could not, who has cheered me on every step of the way, and my mother, who has listened to every draft of every major story I've ever written before it ever made its way to an editor's desk. Thank you.
Next is finally our Career Award winner.
You are not invisible, Maria Hinojosa wrote in dedicating her 2020 memoir to all the children who grow up in a country that isn't their own. I see you because I still am you. A singular pioneer whose work has filled a void on our airwaves, inspiring generations of Hispanic Americans and paving the way for hundreds of Latinx journalists. She has been a difference maker in many, many ways, more than a summary of her accomplishments, more than they can recount. First Latina reporter at NPR, as well as anchor and executive producer of its Latino USA program. Mainstay of a multiplicity. I'm going to try that one again. It's not even a name. Mainstream of a multiplicity of eye-opening reports at PBS, CBS, and NBC. Founder of the Futuro Media Group, a Harlem-based nonprofit that gives all Americans access to the ups and downs, the Latino American experience. Distinguished journalist and residence at her alma mater, Barnard College. You might say that Maria Delord Hinojosa Ojeda has received just about every meaningful honor in American journalism, save one. We are pleased to add that to her list with the Polk Career Award for a remarkable 40-year record of achievement.
Okay, is this a podium for small people? I'm not so sure. And I have the 6-inch heels on, so. I am the last speaker, so please don't turn on the music until I'm done. Also, I timed it out. Also, I edited out. Also, I added a few things. You know how it goes. Thank you so much, especially to George Polk and his family. He was killed on the job. You know, we don't talk about that. Thank you so much to John Darton, who made the phone call. And he was like, congratulations, we usually don't give it to people as young as you. I was like, all right. And to the too many journalists who have been killed in service in this year. To the many people, also thank you, who have been, also to the Polk Academy, to the Academy of the Polks. To the many people who have been a part of my career in one way or another, colleagues, agents, fans, book buyers. Also, I met several of you who are what I call legacy listeners. You're like, I've been listening for 30 years. I'm like, yes. To all of my fellow award winners, hello, John Lee Anderson, like, hello, like, this is great that we were both on the same stage, and Cecilia Vega. And also the high school winners, okay? So my favorite Mexican saying, those of you who know me know this, I say it a lot, no hay mal que por bien no venga, which means there is no bad from which good cannot come. And the high school journalists here are showing us that the person in the White House is actually doing great things for giving us the next generation of badass journalists who happen to be immigrants and covering the issue of immigration. So thank you for that. Because these journalists, when people are like, oh my God, the business, I teach, because I'm Mexican, I have 15 different jobs. So I know when people are like, oh my God, journalism is dying, I'm like, it's not dying. And our high school students here should be a reminder to all of us, we are not going away. It's going to be different. It's going to be hard. Okay, I'm going to get the thank yous out of the way really fast, and then I'm going to do my little thing. Okay, so to all of my friends and family who are here, Deepa Donde, Maria Teresa Rojas, Brenda Camacho, Carmen Rita Wong, Ingrid Cipriani Matthews, former president of CBS News, and the person who has known me the longest as a journalist, because we went to Barnard together a few years ago, my friend Cheryl Malloy, who makes me lift 30-pound weights in each hand, to the Latino USA staff. We've been on the air for 33 years. If you're like, I don't know it, you should listen to it because we're pretty badass about it. And also to Futuro Media, we are a nonprofit, and so my co-CEO told me I have to remind you, we're a nonprofit. Get it? Okay. To all of the staff, but the ones who are here, Glorimar Marquez, Nancy Trujillo, Nur Saudi, Ginny Montalvo, Luis Luna Chanel de Camp, Tracy Parker Lamel, and my co-CEO, along with Marlon Bishop, Benile Ramirez, a badass investigative journalist in her own right. All right, so you can imagine that I fretted a lot about this speech. I was in a bad mood for a couple of days. Because, you know, how do you get up here and receive a career award in front of a group of the most distinguished journalists in the United States? And how do you address the fact that all of us, even though we didn't choose this particular battle, we are on the front lines of the basic arguments around freedom of the press and the First Amendment. And it's not necessarily a battle we wanted to take on. We just want to do the best journalism that we can. And yet, for me, as an immigrant who was not born here, the possibility that my citizenship could be revoked is something very real, right? It's a part of my life. And the truth is, because we deal in the truth, right, is that there are many days when I wake up and I wonder, well, what benefit did my decades of service and career, what did it really do if we ended up exactly in the place that I was trying to warn about and doing basic journalism to say decades ago, like, I'm just documenting the facts, and, you know, people would look at me and they'd be like, oh, you're so Mexican-y. You're a little bit too immigrant-y. Can you stop with that? I was waving the red flag. But the thing is, it was also me who had to raise my right hand in a courtroom not far from here and say under oath that I would take up arms to defend this country. So, you know, the Constitution and its protections are very real for me. They feel very close to home. And so I thought a lot about this in the context of my life in deciding to become a journalist. You know, the way that it started by watching the news about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, you know, that guy, right? The father, just to be clear. The murder of Martin Luther King, the protests right outside my neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, you know, in that moment I understood as a Mexican immigrant kid that freedom and journalism was the core of American democracy, and it was something that my parents wanted and believed in and taught to us. So shout out to my mom Berta, who just turned 90, and mi papa Raúl Hinojosa, may he rest in peace. So in the process of consuming the media intensely in these years growing up in Chicago, there were a few core things that stayed with me as the journalist who I became. One, I was invisible, and so were my stories. I mean, they just were not on the air. And I watched 60 all the time, you know, all of it, we were right there. But I was invisible, and there weren't people who looked like me being on the news or about the news or in front of the news. Two, there was a way to do journalism with humanity. And I witnessed this in very particular ways in some journalists that I'm going to remark about. And three, that I was also an outsider, right? But I came to accept this in order to help it make me be a better journalist. But I had a particular responsibility because when I started as a journalist, I was still holding my Mexican passport and something that was known as a green card, even though it was actually blue back then, but okay. In fact, my Mexican family made fun of my dad when he became an American citizen. And so I had this outsider status, whether I was in the United States or whether I was in Mexico. The outsider became a part of my identity. The otherness became a part of my identity. And I understood that this is one of my strengths as a journalist. It's one of the tools that I have in my tool belt. So yes, I learned by watching the greats. I mean, yes, Walter Cronkite. Okay, so I did get teary-eyed in the Career Awards names. I was like, oh man, but I'm not gonna cry anymore, I swear. I mean, I better not. Okay, so I learned from the greats, Walter Cronkite. I actually worked for him. I wrote his end-of-the-year speech in 1987 when he did CBS News Radio, and he was like, this was very good. Which was incredible. I admired Edward R. Murrow. I admired the gentlemen of CBS News, but also my guys, Garrick Utley and John Chancellor from Hyde Park, Chicago. They were the ones who taught me because they had something in common, which was this profound sense of humanity in the way that they approached our profession. And I learned from Scott Simon that in an interview, if it was okay, you could extend your arm and touch the person who you were interviewing, their shoulder, of course, with their permission. But I was like, there's a way to do this with humanity. In reading the seminal work of Juan Gonzalez, I hope you all read it, it's called News for All the People. In those moments when we're like, I really need to give this up, this is too hard, you know, et cetera, but I realize that the reason why I don't give up is because I, in fact, am part of a long arc of journalists of conscience in the United States of America that for me begins with my hero, Frederick Douglass. And oftentimes I will be like, you know, because we're a small nonprofit independent journalism company that wins all kinds of amazing awards, but still it's hard. And I'm like, but if Frederick could do this, if Frederick could do this, if Ida B. Wells could do this, if Jovita Idar could do this, I can too. And so understanding that I'm a part of this long arc of journalism, of conscience in the United States, is what gave me my center. Okay, but I'll never forget as a cub reporter at NPR, my first editor who said the most insulting thing to me, which was, oh, come on, Maria, we all know about your agenda. And I was like, my agenda? I mean, I was a cub reporter. It was an insult. So what are you talking about? I said, oh, we know about your Latino agenda. And I did have the perfect comeback, rarely does one. And I was like, well, does that mean that you have a white male agenda? And he didn't know what to say because it made me think about the agenda that I did have. And I wanted people to feel something in my reporting. Now, I know you want me to dish all the chisme and the good journalism about all of our fun colleagues like that I just shared, but I'm not going to do that. Because what I want to do is I want to end by talking about One, the next generation that exists at Futuro Media. That's why I created it 15 years ago. I'm wearing a quinceañera dress in a party coming up, I swear. Hold on, I just got a call, of course, from unknown. But instead of going on about the gossip and the fun stuff that we've all lived through as women in this business. What? Really? Okay, I'm actually going to talk about what a few people who have won have mentioned, which is to take a moment to recognize the people who actually have to deal with the reality of our lives 24/7. And so I'm talking about our families, and I'm getting ready to celebrate 35 years of marriage. Hello, I'm a dinosaur. You don't need to applaud, it's okay, it's okay. You can applaud at the end. But during that time, at one point I was getting ready to do live reporting about the 26 immigrant rights rallies, and I needed to go to San Antonio to do a live show with NPR and PBS on Cinco de Mayo, which happens to be my daughter's birthday. And I was like, oh my God, mijita, sometimes there's moments in history that take precedence. And she was like, is history more important than my birthday? And I was like, yeah. Or the time that I was doing the documentary of my life about child marriage in Africa and India, traveling all over the world, and she was weeping because she missed me. Oh, right? Or the time when my son told me that he and I would be in deep conversations about something, and then Suave would call from prison, and I would walk away from my son and go take the call from Suave. That was a gut punch. I made it up to him because his future wife is an NPR videographer who he met on assignment with me, going to prison to visit Estrella, who this award is also dedicated to. So he's cool with my apologies. So then there is my husband. So many days he would say, wait a second, I set you out on your day, gave you coffee, café con leche. You went out into the world as a happy woman, and you've come back depleted, filled with angst because of all of the things that I would have seen. He didn't say anything about the fact that I was gone too much or too often. And okay, my husband was not raised in this country, so he's US geography. So it didn't really matter if I was in Colorado, California, Oregon, no importaba. But he never made me feel guilty about not being around. In fact, he says he fell in love with me because of my convictions as a journalist. And I fell in love with him because he was a gorgeous, fearless Dominican artist who made paintings that lifted me and made me dance with the stars in my heart. He also told me when I would get ready to write my first stories at NPR, and he would say, you don't have PMS, you have PSS, pre-story syndrome. He prepped me for my interview when CNN wanted me to hire away from NPR, and he said, you need to ask CNN why you should leave NPR. And I was like, don't, too much. I asked them that, and they were also too much, but then they hired me. He was the one who would always make sure that the imposter syndrome was not taking me down. He was the one who said, oh, that man who's giving you hell in your journalistic life right now, he's not going to matter to you in 5 years. Right? He has given me so much grace and independence, my grounding, my listening board, a great father and partner, and so this award goes to the three of them. Don't applaud yet until you hear their full names. So the award goes to my daughter, María Jurema Guadalupe de los Indios Pérez Hinojosa, my son, Raúl Ariel Jesus de Todos los Santos Pérez Hinojosa, and my husband, Germán Emilio Pérez. Thank you so much for this Polk Award. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congratulations, Maria. That's the end of the program. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank the Polk judges. You're remain anonymous, but you know who you are. I hope you do. I'd like to thank Ralph Engelman for organizing and running the symposium yesterday, and Leslie Stahl for doing such a brilliant job. Okay. A special thanks to our friends at CBS, and know that you have our support. And finally, winners, if you would drift down to this area for a group photo, and you may fetch your posters and take them home if you want, if you're not embarrassed on the subway. Right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.